Hello everyone, and welcome to another math video by me, Jake the Tutor. And as promised, I now have made a list of 3 questions regarding graph transformations as kind of a somewhat comprehensive, a little bit, I mean, I would have come up with more questions, but 3 is pretty good for a basic overview. If you, of course, if you have any questions, feel free to ask in the comments or something, or let me know if you're struggling with this, and I'll give more examples if possible. But in any case, I have 3 questions here, and what I'd like to see you do is that if you truly need help with graph transformations, that you'll look through these problems, which I'm going to do shortly, and then pause the video, try to do them yourself, and then come back, play the video as I solve them out, and compare your answer to mine and see if you got it right. So without further ado, let's take a look at these questions. So given f of x equals 3x, we are to determine 2 things based off of this. Determine what transformations have been applied to f of x to get g of x, where g of x is equal to 3 times the quantity of x plus 4 minus 1. And on the second problem, so on this question, we're just going to kind of write down in, I guess, in a verbal form, if you were to say this to a teacher, for instance, but in this case, we're just going to just write down, not really any math involved, what transformations were needed to get to this new function. Part 2, we're going to find a function all on our own, a function h of x, such that h of x is the graph of f of x, reflected across the y-axis and shifted 2 units up. So we're going to apply what we know about transformations to come up with a new function h of x that satisfies these conditions. And then at question 3 down here, I ask you to shift the graph y equals x squared such that its vertex is located at the point 2, 1. Plot your result alongside y equals x squared to check your answer. So you can use Mathway, like I've shown you in the last video, to compare your answer to y equals x squared to see if you shifted it correctly. So at this point, I would pause the video if you want to work these problems out yourself, and check back later to see if you're right. And with that, I'm going to start in doing these problems. Okay, so let me get my drawing tool out here. Alright, so determine what transformations have been applied to f of x to get g of x, where g of x is this given function. So the first thing to note is that we still have the same slope, 3. So yeah, 3 is still the same, so the slope didn't change, so there's no scaling involved, which not too big of a surprise. But alright, next thing we note is what's inside the parentheses here, and also what is outside the parentheses. So inside the parentheses, we have 4 added directly to x. And what we need to think about first is when we see something added or subtracted directly to x, is that this is a horizontal transformation. And once we have got that down, we see that it's a plus, which indicates a shift to the left, which is, as we kind of mentioned in the horizontal translation video, that is a little unintuitive, that you have to use a negative to go to the positive side of x, and then you use a positive where you add something to go to the negative side. But in any case, this indicates a horizontal, also a shift of 4 units to the left, or the negative x direction. So that's one of them. The other one has to do with this negative 1. which this negative 1 is outside of x. In other words, it's not subtracted directly to x itself, it's subtracted to the function as a whole. So this indicates a vertical shift. And since it's negative, this is the intuitive one, so a negative indicates a downward shift. So the second shift is a shift of 1 unit down in the negative y direction. And those are the only two shifts on this question, so that would be the two things you need to write down for this one, is that we shifted it 4 units to the left and we shifted it 1 unit down. Alright, so then for part 2, we need to find h of x such that h of x is the graph of f of x reflected across the y-axis rather, and shifted 2 units up. So the first thing we should do is probably write down f of x just as a reminder. F of x is equal to 3x. So now I have to do some things to 3x to satisfy these two conditions. Alright, first thing that they say here is a reflection across the y-axis. And if you remember from the reflecting across the x and y-axes portion of this series, is that a reflection across the y-axis requires that you take the negative of x itself. So the first thing we'll do to find h of x is we will multiply by a negative x instead of a positive x. So I'm going to say 3 times a negative x. Now we're not quite done yet, but we will see what we have to do next. So next we're going to shift 2 units up. And if you remember from the vertical shift section, that just indicates a addition or subtraction to the function itself rather than directly to x. So we won't need to subtract anything directly to x here, so I'm going to close this parenthesis, and since it's going to be a upward shift, we're going to add 2, so plus 2, which if we remove more parentheses we will get something more like negative 3x plus 2. And so that will be the answer. H of x will equal negative 3x plus 2. And that's the answer to 2. Alright, and finally for question 3, we're going to shift the graph of y equals x squared so that the vertex is located at the point 2, 1. And then we're going to use Mathway to check our answer. Or if you have a graphing calculator, that works too. And I would recommend that actually. So anyway, the vertex, as we know, of a parabola, I was going to kind of sketch a parabolic looking shape over here. The vertex is the point at which it kind of stops going, like, so it's where the graph changes direction. Instead of going down, it goes back up again, or is like a local minimum. It has a tangent line right about like that. So anyway, it's the lowest point of the parabola, or the highest point if it's downward facing. But the point is, it's this lowest point. So of regular y equals x squared, that point is located at the origin, at the point 0, 0. So essentially all they're asking us to do here is to shift this graph 2 units in the positive direction to the point x equals 2, and then up to the point y equals 1. So we get this point here. So essentially we're going to shift this graph 2 units to the right and 1 unit upward. So the first thing we'll do is write our original function, y equals x squared. And alright, so the first thing we'll do is we will shift it to the right. So to do this, if we want to shift something to the right, we have to subtract something directly to x. So the first step, and we want to shift it to the right 2 units. So it's we're going to subtract 2 directly to x. So we're going to need a set of parentheses. So we'll go x, so parentheses x minus 2. Notice that it's not x squared, at least not yet. See, now we're going to put the squared. going to be a quantity squared. And then we're going to shift it up 1 unit, which means you just add 1 to the end of this to shift it up. You add 1 to the entire function. And this will equal the shifted graph that they want us to have. Alright, and so let's go plot this in Mathway. Now I'll just get rid of these. Alright, here we go. So let's plot the original. Y equals x squared. And there's the original parabola for this purple line. Now we will graph our result, which I'm going to kind of reveal to us here so we can type this in with ease. Y equals parenthesis x minus 2 close parenthesis. Whoops, I didn't use the right one. Okay, I'm going to square this quantity. And I'm going to arrow over and add 1. And then it should calculate x minus 2 squared plus 1. Alright, let's... oh boy. Let's see if we can zoom in anymore. Is there a zoom in button? Don't be slow, Mathway. Okay. Alright, let's take a look then. So the purple is the original graph, y equals x squared, and red is our graph. So we see this looks about like the vertex at this point right about here. And it looks like we moved over 2 to the right, and then we moved up 1. And this is where it hits, so there we go. We have checked our answer, and we see that our answer here of y equals quantity of x minus 2 squared plus 1 is the correct shifted graph. So if you got all those correct, kudos to you, and it looks like that you understood everything. And if not, well, that's not, I mean, it's not terrible. I'm not saying that's bad or anything. You just probably just messed up on something minor, and now that you've seen the correct way, it probably, hopefully, all makes sense. But if it doesn't, I encourage you to ask questions all the same if something really did, mesh or click, and I will do my best to make sure that it does. So that concludes graph transformations, and I will see you in the next math video.